So then what would our stressors be? What causes it, right? What's causing that stress? And then what's adrenaline? Happens when you get adrenaline. Okay, heart starts racing. You get a lot of energy. It's kind of how your body works through these different stresses. Yep, how your body works through the stress. Can give examples of it too if you want. And then when you're done with the vocab, go ahead and put your computer away and then grab out that note packet. Okay, if throughout the day you happen to come across any of these empty water bottles, like I'm not joking, like they're really cheap ones, I could use some more before our activity on Wednesday. So bring them to me so I can use them. Empty them out. Okay. Today we're looking at what is stress. Stress is how our body and our mind react to all these things that we have going on. We get stress on a daily basis, and kind of how we react to those is really important. Some of us react negatively, some of us react positively. And then it kind of depends on how much of it is and what kind of stress we have going on. So de-stress is our negative stress. This is what actually can start to make you sick if you get too much stress. So last week is one of those first weeks that can be actually a negative stress because there's just a lot going on. So I, throughout last week, was taking like those emergencies like you get when you're sick. Your parents make you probably put them in water, right? I was taking 2 of those in the morning and drinking it throughout the day. My husband's like, "Are you starting to feel sick?" I said, "No, I'm just trying to be preventative." I know that my body's going to be run down because I've gone from sitting at home and not talking like I do, and then all of a sudden standing on my feet all day, talking all day. It's just a whole different kind of stuff that's happening and going on. So all of that can be kind of in that negative side of it. Now, the eustress or the positive stress actually helps you achieve those goals. So school is kind of a positive stress because you have an end-term goal of graduation. We also look at a wedding. A wedding is a stressful thing to plan and prepare, but the overall outcome is positive. Hopefully it was a good day, right? And you have to learn to be like, okay, the little things have to learn to roll off your back. You can't be so hung up on all parts being perfect. So when our body sometimes can't balance all of these ins and outs that we have of our stresses. And so when that happens, some of us have sleep disturbances where we can't sleep all night long. You wake up throughout the night. I wake up quite often. I'm usually up about 3-4 times a night. Some nights I just literally stare at my clock. Some nights I have a list of things that I need to do. When we were at home during quarantine, I woke up the one time at 3:00 in the morning on a Sunday going into Monday morning, realized I hadn't posted what I was supposed to post on Sunday, and like was up at 3:00 in the morning on my computer, like doing school stuff. And my husband comes on. He's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I just have to have this done. I was supposed to have it done yesterday at 5 and I did it." And he was like, "Okay." Sometimes I actually have to get up and actually write these things down on my phone. Or I actually have a notepad and pencil in my desks or on my nightstand so I can actually write them down so I can forget about it and I can go back to sleep. Otherwise, I keep thinking about it all night long. Panic attacks. Often we can describe a panic attack as like a room is closing in. It keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And someone often feels like they just need to run. They need to get out. They need to get away from it. And so when there's so much happening and going on, that's how our body kind of reacts. And then some people have a really low level of enjoyment in their life because they're just always so worried about the negative side of it. I have to work sometimes to remind myself to forget about it and to just move on. Okay. I just have to learn to let things roll off my shoulders. And then that stress tolerance is how much can you handle? Okay. Before you have that breakdown. I all told you about my breakdown last Thursday morning when I was like crying, trying to do yoga in the morning because I was just like, that was my breakdown. That was my moment. I couldn't do it anymore. But I got up and I had my moment, and then I got back to going and back to work and whatever that might potentially be. So understand that we all have our level. We have to know when we start to get to that level and how can we bring ourselves back down. So sometimes identifying what is actually causing you to be stressed is very important, because it's easier, I always think, to help ourselves when we know what's creating these problems. So biological stressors. This is a biochemical imbalance, mental or physical illnesses, disabilities, or injuries. We actually have people that have mental illnesses that create more problems for them. We have people that are ADHD that sitting still in a classroom like this all day long is not very productive. And I've talked to several teachers, especially more middle school teachers. They said some of their students who were horrible sitting in a normal classroom were failing. They went to home to distance learning, and actually their grades started to increase dramatically because they could work on homework for like 15, 20 minutes and then go do something else. And then they could come back on it because that's how their brain needs to work. They needed more breaks. So it actually took the kid more homework time throughout the day, but they needed more breaks throughout. I just had a girl, I was walking right before you guys came in here, went to the bathroom, and here's someone going across on crutches. And she's like panting as she's walking down the hallway. I go, "Are you okay?" She's like, "No, I think it just happened over the weekend." So you could already tell, like, think about her day now. How much more stressful this is going to be, walking one ways down the hallway and needing extra time. It just adds to that level. Our environment, poverty, pollution, crowding, noise, natural disasters. What just happened in Iowa like 2 weeks ago? What did they call it? Called it a inland hurricane. So a hurricane obviously has the water, but they had wind levels of a hurricane, but it went like through the whole state of Iowa. All of their cornfields down, houses, like they didn't have power for several days. Like that is a stress. You think they're worried about going to work for the day or what clothes they're going to put on for the day? You know, we all kind of hit this environmental stress last year when we all of a sudden we all went home with the pandemic and we didn't know what's happening and what's going on. Believe it or not, we lived the most normal life than anyone in the United States and South Dakota. We did not have stores that were 100% shut down and restaurants that were 100% shut down, and you couldn't go anywhere. My husband and a couple of our neighbors had to travel for work. And the one guy that knew, he had to go into Minnesota, and there was not a single restaurant open in Minnesota. What do you do when you have to travel to a hotel and be there for work for a week and you can't go any place to go get food? Like he had to pack food when he left to be able to get to locations. And my husband would talk to his bosses and they were like, well, yeah, we order pizza. We just go pick it up curbside. And they were like, you can't do that. And they were living in Indianapolis and, those areas over there. Nothing was open except for restaurant or grocery stores. And then that was very, very limited. Our cognitive or our thinking, it's the way you perceive a situation. Some of you are the person who overthinks things. That you think people are really staring at you, but they're not. You're convinced they are. You've convinced yourself. It's how you think about things. So you have to learn to not worry about what maybe others are thinking or how a situation is going to play out. Behavioral, this is negative reactions that our body has based upon the use of different substances. So tobacco, alcohol, the way we dress, exercising, not exercising, all of those things. I know based upon my clothes that I wear, I feel and act differently. I really knew this when I taught at a school in Iowa. We could only, as teachers, we could only wear jeans on Fridays when there was a home event. And then if you would, sometimes you could go like a month and a half, they would maybe throw one in there, like kind of throw us a bone, like, okay, you can wear. And those days, now granted, I taught 4 class periods a day in 90-minute blocks, and I wore jeans those days, and I was like, I don't care what happens in my room. I was just so excited. I got to wear jeans. Like, I was so relaxed, and I was relaxed in tennis shoes and just like so more of a laid back personality where I was like, didn't matter. Now, being here, Brandon, every day, every Friday is guaranteed, or any end of the week is guaranteed. Jeans, no problem. Go back 2 years ago when Dr. Telcott gave us these special shirts that we could wear those also any day of the week that we wanted to wear jeans, so you could actually wear jeans twice. Honestly, that at the beginning, our bodies would be like, oh, going to be more relaxed. And then you learn how to like work through it, change to it. I don't wear heels ever. Like I wear tennis shoes or sandals. I have to be comfortable, which then I feel like I teach more comfortably and not so straightforward. Okay. For those of you who are all thinking about ACTs coming up, do not, and I repeat, do not show up to take the ACTs in your pajamas. People do. They're like, oh, but I'm comfortable. I'm going to be relaxed. You're going to be so comfortable and so relaxed, you're not going to pay attention to what you're taking a test for. Your actual test days and semester test days, you should not come in your pajamas. I had a girl one time came for a semester test, and she came in, rushed in, and she was like still half asleep. And I'm like, and she's like, I'm hot. And I'm like, well, take your sweatshirt off. She's like, I have nothing else on. I'm like, you didn't even put a bra on today? She's like, I was like, you didn't? I'm like, so you were literally standing here in a sweatshirt and leggings, and that's it, all for clothing. She goes, mm-hmm. And she couldn't concentrate she was taking a semester test, 20% of your grade, kind of an important piece. She could not focus and concentrate. And I was like, oh, don't do that again. She was like, okay, I won't. Like, you dress up, and then that's how you respond. Our life changes. So major situations in our life, pets die, parents die, divorcing, separating, relationship problems within friends group, all of those things that can all add to another stress that we often have. Okay. So now on the next couple of slides, they're kind of shaded in the gray. I want you from the start of last school year to now, as you read these, if you have experienced a death of your parents, I want you to circle that number. Okay. So read through the next couple of slides on your own. There's 3 of them, I think. And circle any of the numbers that you have. And if something has happened more than once, you can circle it more than once. Okay, when you're done reading all of them, I want you to do this next step. Add up all the numbers you circled. And if you circled something more than once, add that in there. Add up all those numbers and just write it down on your paper. We're not going to share those numbers with anyone. as you guys start looking at your numbers, some of you are like less than the 100. You haven't had much of change. In that 100 to 200, you've experienced moderate changes throughout your life in just the last year that have added some stress. And some of you are over that 200. Okay. Not everything we put on here was negative, was it? Look at the second to last one, going on a vacation. We probably actually could have switched this out to, at this point this year, like canceling a vacation, added just as much stress. I mean, I loved the year we went to Disney with my mom and dad and my brother and his 2 kids. Loved the idea of going to Disney, hated the whole thing. Because guess who had to plan everything? I had to plan all of what restaurants we were eating at, because we had a group of 9 plus. So you had to schedule all your restaurant ideas. And then we had any of the fast passes. So about 3 weeks before we got there is when the new Avatar building had just opened up. So like the line to get into the Avatar was like 4 and 5 hours. Thankfully, I did the fast pass on that one. So we were less than an hour. That was the last day of vacation, or a second to last day, because the last day my parents were leaving and we were staying a couple more days to go to the beach. But I remember standing in line with my brother and his 2 boys, and he's divorced. And all of a sudden he finally realized what I had done with all the fast passes. And we were sometimes, if you play it right, you could do your 3 fast passes throughout the day, and then you can jump back on and get more of them if you do it early enough in the day. And so I had done that a couple times. I'm on my app, like selecting everyone, getting us in more. And all of a sudden he realized, you had done a lot, haven't you? I'm like, I literally had to schedule in the potty breaks, because like everyone had to go to the bathroom at the same time. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, I didn't enjoy it. I couldn't like relax and just enjoy like having fun. And then of course I have Hayden as the only girl, and then it's 3 boys. So the boys were, heaven forbid we did anything that had to do with a princess, because they were like, that's girly and we won't do that. And my daughter's like, can I please go see some? Like, she was just right at that bubble age of like still needing to see the princesses. And so we can have all kinds of stresses, but what do we do with that? Some of you might have been well over that 200 and you're like, didn't really notice I was under that much stress. And some of you are like well under 100 and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't handle it. Well, we have to learn how to adapt ourselves and kind of learn how to respond to these stresses that we have. So our body responds in some physical ways. Our stress responses that are physical, we often have that fight or flight response. Okay. Fight or flight is, what are you going to do when something occurs? Are you going to flight, which means to run away from the situation, or are you going to fight and work through that particular problem? And we can do it as simple as when those fire alarms go off. You know logically that you're supposed to go down the hallway, right, and go outside. But in a real situation, some people panic at first. They're actually asking, where is the fire at? Instead of moving away from the situation. Think about if we had to go into a lockdown right now. Which reaction would you be? Would you be like ready to try and crawl out the window to get out of the building as fast as you could? Or are you going to be ready to fight back? We all react differently to different situations. During this fight or flight response, we get this adrenaline rush. It's a hormone that's released in our body during stress, and it does certain things for us for a reason. So your breath starts to speed up. If you're breathing more, you're breathing in more oxygen. You're actually making your body more alert. Your heart starts to race. More blood is pumping. Where there's more oxygen in it, it's getting around our body. Your muscles tense up. We actually know of people during a high adrenaline rush and during that fight or flight, parents have been known to pick up car vehicles if their child is trapped underneath it. Muscles work more than they ever can work naturally. Pupils widen. Actually helps with your vision and your sight, and you're more alert. Your digestion stops. Like your bowels stop working. It's kind of a weird thought, isn't it? Now, my dad used to be on the fire department. When a fire alarm goes off at 3 o'clock in the morning, you think the first thing he needs to do is, I need to go pee? No, he needs to get to the fire. So your body, that physical part of it, will actually stop and not need to do it. Gets dressed into now. Back when my husband and I got engaged, that particular there was forest fires out in the Black Hills. So he had gone out and was training and was helping with the forest fire. So he has like a full jumpsuit. So that jumpsuit is actually in the garage. And so when the fire alarm, when anything would go off, he would run out, throw that suit on. And then depending upon the level of they're all volunteers, right? Some go directly to the site of the fire and some go directly to the fire station to finish getting dressed. My dad was one that would go directly to the site because he was also the power lineman in town. He could shut off power to any house. Kind of important when it's a house fire. So he would go directly to that location so he could remove fire or stop the power. And then they would bring the rest of his gear. And you might go a couple of hours and then all of a sudden the adrenaline starts to carry down. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. It's the first thing I got to do when I get up is I got to pee. So now all of a sudden the body starts to settle down and now the rest of the bowels kind of start going back to normal working. And then increase of our sugar levels. This is what's going to help with our body through that energy, keep us kind of moving. We also can have stress-related diseases or disorders. And this is based upon how your body reacts when you start to have a large amount of stress. So, heart disease. If you deal with too much stress, you're more likely to have a heart attack because you put a lot of extra stress, that extra heartbeats, all of those things have caused to the heart. Chronic fatigue. So this is like sleeping, not being able to get up and move, your body physically becomes really low. Having different illnesses, always sick, anxiety disorders, things like that. One of them that I often will get, if I start to get really, really stressed, and I mentally have not recognized that I'm getting very, very stressed, I will actually start to get a rash on this part of my arm. And I noticed it back before I ever had kids. I would start to get stressed and I wouldn't even know it was itchy. And I would just start scratching it. And then I'd be talking in class and then I start scratching it again and keep talking. Next thing you know, I have like a bumpy rash. Went into the doctor and he's like, I hadn't changed anything to create a rash. And we realized it was stress related. And so there are still times I get to that level and my husband will be like, you're scratching your arm. And I'm like, oh, I am. Oops. Maybe I need to be more aware of my surroundings, how I'm reacting or not reacting to things. Okay. I taught with a gal who in the summertime, her skin would clear up. And as soon as school would start, she was a special ed teacher at the high school, but we only had one. We were in a much smaller school. And it's about 2 weeks into school, she would start to then get rashes and bumps and sores on her body. And it would stay that way through the entire school year till about a month when school was out. And then all of a sudden her stress would be gone and then her skin would clear up. And then school would start back up again and then she would do it again. But she wasn't doing anything else to get rid of the stress. She just continued to harp on it. I also get cold sores. And those are usually stress related as well, which then doesn't help any because it actually has a bigger outbreak the more stress you get. And then people see it and you're like, ah. So I just have to be aware of, oh, that's happening, that's coming. And then I take my medicine and then hopefully I don't have a complete outbreak on it. As we look at long-term stress, first we hit that alarm stage. This is that fight or flight. Your body reacts. You're on high alert. Eventually hit stage 2 where your body becomes a little more resistant to things. Your body can fight through illnesses that normally you might have gotten sick from. And then eventually hit stage 3. This is where you become completely exhausted and your body starts to break down. You start to get the physical fatigue and the psychological and the pathological. Your body can't fight these off. You can't worry through them anymore. So my father-in-law, my husband's dad died 6 years ago. And he dealt with cancer for about 3 years or so. And a great response when I think about this one was my mother-in-law late in his stages of cancer. So it started off as prostate cancer, which eventually went to bladder cancer, and then it went through remission and all these different things, eventually metastasized into brain cancer. So he wasn't physically, mentally the same person anymore. He was actually, his was on the left side, and so it was like he was a robot. He didn't know how to make emotions and emotional connections, but he could tell you the zip code of any town in the state of South Dakota. He was a postmaster. He knew, like, he could tell you who and anyone's address in town, but he didn't know how to give his own grandkids a hug. Okay, so things were a little wonky. My mother-in-law was a 4th grade teacher at the time and had just put in her retirement at the beginning of the year. This all happens the second half of the school year. So early on, she was on very high alert. She was noticing when he was doing funky things, weird things. We started getting things on track. She would go through time periods where she wasn't sleeping. So in a matter of a week, my father-in-law with his brain cancer went from completely walking to 100% wheelchair bound in a week, because the tumors, he had 17 of them in one side of his brain, were actually paralyzing him from backwards. Like all of a sudden his feet didn't work, and then his knees, and then up to his hips, and all of a sudden he couldn't stand and walk on his own in less than a week. So that meant someone had to pick him up and put him on the toilet. But then there was another tumor that was pushing on his brain that would trigger the sensation that he had to pee, even though he didn't have to. So then he would get mad. He would yell at us to like put him on the toilet. You'd let him sit on the toilet for an hour, take him off, and 5 minutes later he wants back on. And so she had gone for like a week without sleep. And we had said, okay, you have 3 boys. They all need to come and help throughout the night. So they did for about a week. They took care of taking care of him so she could try and get some sleep. And I think her crashing moment, the day she actually realized that she needed to send him to hospice because she couldn't do this anymore, was the day that it was in the summer. Myself and my 2 kids had gone over to the house. We had just put him down for a nap. She came downstairs with me and I said, just take a nap. And she's like, no, you guys are here. I'm like, that's the point of why I'm here. I'm here to help him, and you can take a nap. So she won't. She refuses. She's sitting on the couch, and we are downstairs, and Hayden is walking on the treadmill. And the kids, we had to set a timer. So when Hayden's 5 minutes were up, Easton was going to get on the treadmill. So Hayden's walking on the treadmill, and we said, oh, time is up, time to stop it. And she's like, no. And she turns sideways on the treadmill, right? And the whole thing goes whoop. And so now she's stuck up against the wall with the treadmill still going and like burned off the top layer of skin on her arm and her thigh. Grandma's sitting in the chair laughing, just laughing. She thought it was funny. And I'm like, Hayden's stuck. Hayden can't get up. So I go over and I pick Hayden up, and you can just already tell, like, whew, okay, we're going to have to be going to the doctor later on today. We're not going to rush out right now because I'm supposed to be here helping with my father-in-law. And so she finally realizes that Hayden's bawling. I'm getting, ice packs and cold towels to put on it because all this stuff. And all of a sudden she looks at me and she goes, I think I'm going to go lay down now. I'm like, really? Now I got 2 people. I've got my father-in-law who's going to be getting up any minute. I've got Hayden who I want to get out of there. But like, we kept trying to get through all this, and she didn't realize how tired and how exhausted she was. I think until she sat there and was laughing at Hayden and then realized we had a missing layer of skin. And she eventually, that was kind of that turning point that she needed to get more help than what she could actually handle. And eventually he went to hospice then about 3 days after that. But then he kind of plateaued in hospice and then eventually passed away. So we have different types of personalities when we start thinking about how do people react to things. So we have some people who are a type A personality. They're very competitive, very high achieving, most likely to have a heart attack. But they get stuff done. I always say this is like Schleckaway. Have you ever noticed when you stand next to him, trying to have a conversation with him, he like doesn't stop moving? There's like always a leg bouncing or always something bouncing, and it actually bounces more when he has more stuff going on in his head. I have sat next to him when there's nothing going on, and he actually can be kind of calm. But he is that type A personality. What other teachers are type A personalities? Okay, Sturgeon. Yep. Anyone else you consider type A? Mr. Risty. Okay. So we'll look at type B. Very, very laid back, non-competitive, less likely to have a heart attack because nothing bothers them. Now, I used to say when Mr. Thorson used to be at the high school, and this was totally Mr. Thorson until you really made him mad. And then he'd let you know it. But like most things just bounced off it, like it didn't bother him. I would say Frecking still can be like that. He can let things kind of roll off, like, not that big a deal. And sometimes I can go in, I'm like, no, really, it's a big deal. And he's like, nah, not as much. Okay. Any teachers that are very type B? Canfield. He is definitely a type B. Trout. Is another great one. Mr. Boynt. For those of you that had him. Okay. And then we have a hearty personality, where I would like most of you to get to. Hearty personality is someone who stays healthy during very traumatic, stressful situations. They do have high level of resiliency, but they actually like change. They're okay with things being different. They can kind of roll with the punches, but yet, they do have a purpose and what they're working towards. But they also have a sense of control over what's happening and going on around them. Where your type B really are like, schedule change, whatever. They don't care if you're late. They're like, laid back. Type A are like, I needed to know 5 days ago what was going to happen and I needed to have that information. And then when you change it, they're like, no, this is what we decided. We can't change it again. Hearty's that in the middle, where we can take on changes, adapt, roll the punches, but yet still have a very strong power of control over everything that's happening and going on. What are some teachers that sit in this hearty personality? Anderson. Okay. Anyone else?
Sittig? No.
Yeah. Yep. Mel Sittig. I would like to say I'm a hearty personality, but I think I'm too type A. My husband, he laughs. He's like, yes, Naomi, we are in a pandemic. We don't know how many days we're going to stay in school, but no, I really need to know, because I need to know, like, if I'm planning things out, like, what. He's like, you're never going to know the answer to that, and I have to learn that I'm going to have to change on the fly, and not always, my mind doesn't always want to let me go there. Our systematic responses, those physical disorders that result rather than, from stress rather than from the injury. So this would be my example of my rash on my arm. Psycho deals with the mind, somatic deals with the body. So getting that physical stress, getting the cold sore, getting the rash because of the stress that we have kind of going on. Okay, you have one assignment in Schoology underneath the stress management. It should be the fourth one down. What is stress? So the first one is matching of a bunch of those terms. Question 2, I want you to really be careful on question 2. I have what are stress responses and stress-related disorders. Notice that's only going to be used once. Stressors, there's 8 of them. So make sure you know you can use that 8 times. Stress-related disease and / disorder, that's going to be used 7 times. And then a stress response. Stress response happens at the moment when that stress, what does your body physically do? Okay. Disease and illness is like more of the long term. So you're going to use those more than once. And then it's really tell me, give me some names of type A, type B, and hardy personalities. Which personality is you? Which personality do you think is the hardest to work with? A lot of my type A people don't work so well with type B. Type A is type A in a group setting is the one who does the whole project. Type B is the one who sits back and does nothing. They don't really care what the grade is, as long as someone else did it for them. Okay. So you have the rest of class here. You've got about 11 minutes or so. So hopefully you should get a good chunk of this done. If you need to, as long as you stay in your seats, if you ask questions to the people right around you, that's okay. But staying in your seats is important here. And then we'll turn this in. That'll be due tomorrow as you walk into class.